Welcome to another episode, everyone. Stanley Tookie Williams, co-founder of the infamous Crips. Some say he's a hero. Others have said that he has a murderous history, a gruesome, murderous past in which he went to death row for these gruesome murders and ultimately was killed on death row by the state. This is the life and times, the life story of Crip co-founder Stanley Tookie Williams. Let's get into it.
The Crip King, the King of the Crips, and the Crip Godfather are just a few of the names that have been used to describe Stanley Tookie Williams, the man who called himself the co-founder of the Crip gangs in Los Angeles, California. And his story has been told hundreds of times. The infamous Crip leader, convicted of violent crimes and sentenced to death by execution. But what many of the stories are missing is what happened before Tookie became a Crip, why he became a Crip, and the reason he later apologized for his part in creating the Crips. Tookie was born Stanley Tookie Williams III on December 29, 1953, in New Orleans, Louisiana. But from the day he was born, everyone in his family just called him Tookie. His mother was 17 years old when she had him, and his father left before Tookie's first birthday, leaving Tookie's mother to raise him on her own. But being a black woman living in the South in the 1950s, it was almost impossible for Tookie's mother to find a way to make good money. So in 1959, in search of a better life for her and her son, she and 6-year-old Tookie boarded a Greyhound bus headed for Los Angeles, California. When Tookie and his mother got to LA, they moved into an apartment on the west side of South Central. The apartment and the neighborhood looked beautiful from the outside. Green, manicured lawns and rows of perfectly built 3- and 4-bedroom homes. But the neighborhood wasn't anything like it appeared to be, and was actually one of the most dangerous areas in all of Los Angeles, with high rates of unemployment, poverty, and street crime. Drugs, violence, prostitution, all of it was right outside Tookie's front door. The first time he went outside to play, he got into a fist fight with kids from the neighborhood who jumped him to see how tough he was. He was 6 years old. From that day on, Tookie learned that conflict and brutality was a regular thing in South Central. Every day he stepped outside, he'd witness different acts of cruelty and rage. Fighting neighbors, hustlers preying on the weak and vulnerable, and criminals violently taking what didn't belong to them. Everybody was at war over something. The cold and tough way of his neighborhood wasn't the only thing Tookie was subjected to as a kid. He also had to deal with racist 1960s police officers who would harass and attack South LA residents of all ages without cause. With constant exposure to violent behavior coming from all sides, Tookie's young mind began to believe that all the brutality around him was normal. He became desensitized, numb to it all, and he developed a do whatever it takes to survive attitude.
And this is not to excuse or justify anyone's actions or anyone's life. Nevertheless, studies even indicate, they denote that you are indeed a product of your environment. If you grow up in a certain area around certain stuff and without the proper guidance leading you out of that misery, then you will become victim to that environment. You will adapt and adopt the characteristics of the environment in which you are raised in. These are just the facts. So when she says that Tookie became desensitized to his surroundings and had to fight back, well, it's either fight or flight. However, in this situation, steep in Los Angeles, violent Los Angeles, California, oftentimes there is no flight. You cannot even escape. You cannot run away. You must only fight.
While Tookie was getting an education in the streets, he was also attempting to get an education in the classroom. He was a good student. He was quiet, kept to himself, and enjoyed reading. And all throughout elementary school, he got A's and B's in class. But Tookie couldn't escape the world around him. When he was 12, he started smoking weed and sniffing glue. By the time he was in high school, he was on to heavier drugs. His grades dropped, and he'd skip school to go to downtown LA and make money hustling or stealing. Tookie's mother tried to steer him right. When Tookie was young, she taught him the fundamentals of right from wrong. And as a punishment for bad behavior, he'd get regular beatings. And when Tookie got older, she would take him to church 2 and 3 times a week, and had him seeing a psychiatrist to treat him, because she believed there was something wrong with him, mentally. But there was nothing wrong with Tookie's mind. Tookie would later say in interviews that growing up, he was a very normal child who was living in an abnormal environment. Eventually, Tookie got expelled from school for stealing.
And that's the crux of it. A normal individual living in an abnormal situation. Because living in gang-infested Los Angeles, California is abnormal. This is not a normal existence that anyone should really be subjected to. Now, of course, at this time, there were not Crips or Bloods. As we know, he started the Crips. So while growing up in a violent environment, you may say, well, there were not even gangs then. Well, there were not even Crips and Bloods then. No, but there were gangs at this juncture, just not Crips and Bloods yet. There was bloodshed and violence on the streets of Los Angeles, as well as many other city streets around the globe. Regardless, nevertheless.
From the cafeteria. His mother moved him to a new school, and he got expelled again for fighting. In all, Tookie was expelled from 7 different high schools around LA before graduating. The one benefit that came with Tookie always transferring schools is that he was able to meet people from outside his neighborhood, with many of the people being gang members and gang leaders. This gave Tookie an advantage over others because he learned firsthand what gangs ran certain areas of town. Although the Blood and the Crip gangs didn't exist yet, there were still a lot of black neighborhood gangs that did, and many of them approached Tookie to join them. But Tookie refused. Tookie actually despised gangs at first. He didn't like the bully mentality of gang members, and he preferred to keep to himself or with a close group of homeboys he grew up with. But the gangs didn't leave Tookie alone. One day after school, a classmate who was a gang member jumped Tookie for his money, beating Tookie so bad he had to be hospitalized. This made Tookie's hatred for gangs even worse, and he began planning on ways he would retaliate. Then, after one of his closest friends also got jumped, Tookie vowed to go against all gangs. He got better at fighting and would never back down from a fight with a gang member. And if he lost, he would fight that same person every day until he won. Tookie gained a reputation as being one of the best fighters in South Central Los Angeles, knocking people out with one punch. Tookie's determination to defend himself and friends from gang members was so strong that people from other schools and neighborhoods would come get him when they needed help or protection from bullies. As Tookie's reputation grew, so did his drug use. When he was 15, he overdosed on pills, downers that were called Red Devils, and he had to go to the hospital to get his stomach pumped.
Keeping up, we see that Tookie, according to this, has been abusing drugs for some time, since 12 years old even. And now at 15 years old, he's overdosed. These drugs play a part in your upbringing, in your mindset, in your decisions. And clearly, he is not of sound mind if he is constantly intoxicated. And apparently so, if he's overdosing, he's using hard drugs.
The day after getting out of the hospital, he was arrested and sent to Juvenile Hall for drug use. This was the first day of many Tookie would have at Juvenile Hall between the ages of 15 and 17. During his time in Juvenile Hall, Tookie learned how to lift weights. He became addicted to transforming his body and becoming bigger and stronger. He also obsessed over strategies on how he would use his newfound physical strength to continue defending himself, friends, and family against neighborhood gangs. Tookie's plan was to get out of Juvenile Hall and form a group that would challenge all the street gangs in the neighborhood. During his last reevaluation hearing before being released from Juvenile Hall, Tookie was asked by a youth counselor, "What are your plans once you're released back into society?" Tookie replied, "I plan on being the leader of the biggest gang in the world." And as soon as Tookie was released, he got to work on his plan, which didn't take long at all. He already had a loyal group around him that was ready and looked up to him, and with his growing reputation around South Central, his transition into a gang leader was never questioned. But Tookie's gang wasn't actually supposed to be a gang in the traditional sense. When they first got started, they didn't even have a gang name. And
so if we're keeping up with the story, then Stanley Tookie Williams originally hated gangs. And the only reason he ended up forming a gang, which we now know to be the infamous Crips, is because the gangs were bullying him. As I said, I haven't seen this before. I like to watch them as you all watch them. I said before she said it, that though there were not Crips and Bloods there in Los Angeles at the time, there were other black gangs. And so these gangs were pressuring Tookie, and he wanted to fight back against these gangs that were pressuring him, and he came up with a bright idea.
they didn't want to be associated with any street gangs. Their only mission was to retaliate and protect themselves from gang members who threatened them. And they carried out this mission daily. Even though they were much smaller than the already established gangs in the neighborhood, Tookie and his group made noise throughout the entire city as they savagely attacked unsuspecting gang members, one after the other. And Tookie made sure that everyone he attacked knew it was him who did it. Then, in 1971, a few months after Tookie began his rally against street gangs, he met Raymond Washington. Raymond Washington was from the east side of South Central and had started the Crips a few years earlier. After a few conversations between Tookie and Raymond Washington, the two decided to form an alliance between Tookie's group on the west side and Raymond's Crip gang on the east side. Tookie and Raymond believed that uniting the two sides would make them an unstoppable force that no Los Angeles gang would be able to defeat. And within a few weeks, they had become one giant Crip gang. But even after joining forces with Raymond, Tookie still didn't like the idea of being a gang. And for a short time, he continued to try and keep up with his original plan of only attacking as a means of self-defense. But as the revenge attacks against other gangs became more violent, and the Crips got bigger and took on more enemies, the shift into Tookie becoming an LA gang member was inevitable. Soon, Tookie became exactly what he was trying not to be. He became the same kind of bully he had set out to protect himself and others from. He would intimidate people and take whatever he wanted. Tookie later said in his autobiography that he and the Crips terrorized the city and made it a living hell. By the time Tookie was 20 years old, the Crips outnumbered all other gangs in LA, and Tookie was rapidly recruiting more members. People started calling him the Crip King. He was the most known and the most targeted gang member in Los Angeles. Rival gang members wanted him dead, and the LA Police Department had him under constant surveillance, labeling Tookie as the Crips' leader and blaming or arresting him for every reported incident involving the Crips. In the middle of all of this, Tookie...
Clearly, they're putting a lot of pressure on Tookie. They know that he's the Crip leader. He started this gang, or at least on his side, on the west side, or what have you. He started the Crips, as we are east side, I don't know. And Raymond Washington already had his side going. But the authorities are on him. They're watching his every move. They're constantly arresting him. And many people throughout the city of Los Angeles want his head. They want him dead as the leader of the Crips. This is what he's up against as he's about to catch the charges for this gruesome murder. Multiple murder. 3 people, I believe it was.
Also had a full-time job as a counselor at a youth group home in Compton, California. He'd been hired for the job by the group home's director, who had met Tookie when Tookie was a kid doing time at a camp for troubled youths. Tookie's job at the group home was to counsel 12 and 13-year-olds and work to keep them from joining gangs, which wasn't easy to do, since most of the kids already knew who Tookie was and wanted to be just like him. Everyone knew who Tookie was. All the stories of his fearless acts against rival gangs had been shared and spread throughout the streets of LA for years, and it lifted him to legendary status. And not only was he recognized as Crip royalty, he was also becoming a well-known bodybuilder, getting so big he was asked to appear on the popular 70s variety show, The Gong Show. He even had plans to compete in a major bodybuilding competition, but was denied the opportunity to compete after it was discovered he was a gang leader. Promoters of the competition feared Tookie's reputation would bring negative attention to the sport. But Tookie continued lifting weights every day, and he got to where he could bench press 500 pounds. But everything else in Tookie's life was becoming unstable. After getting fired from his job, his life became all about bodybuilding, partying, gangbanging, women, and drugs. And his drug use got to the point that it became an addiction. Along with pills and LSD, Tookie was smoking Sherm, also known as PCP. Tookie also had 2 sons that were born. But eventually, all of Tookie's reckless behavior caught up with him. When he was 23, he was shot in a drive-by while sitting on his front porch. The bullets hit him in the legs and feet, and doctors thought he'd never walk again. But after months of therapy, he did, and he was right back to the streets to prove that Crips could keep crippin' through anything. Tookie and his boys truly believed they were invincible. Their motto was, "Crips don't die, we multiply." But when Crips started dying in large numbers, they all realized how wrong that motto was. Things had changed since Tookie had first started the gang, and gang members were no longer fist-fighting to settle their beefs. They were shooting. And in a few short years, hundreds of Crips in Los Angeles were killed, including some of Tookie's closest friends who were there with him from the very beginning. After attending dozens of funerals and getting shot himself, Tookie started to feel less invincible, and he began wondering if everything they were doing was worth it. But by then, it was too late. On March 15th, 1979,
It's never too late, and he was having second thoughts and was rethinking his life. And this happens, you begin to have revelations, particularly when your loved ones are passing out in the street, dying, and going to prison for life sentences, for nonsense. And then you begin to say, well, no, this is not worth it. And apparently he was on that path, but not strongly enough, because something changed in him rather quickly, as we know and are about to find out.
Tookie was riding in the passenger seat of a friend's car when the LAPD pulled him over. Police found a double-barreled shotgun in the trunk of the car, and both men were arrested. While Tookie sat in a holding tank, detectives questioned his friend about 2 crimes that involved robbery and the murder of 4 people. Hours later, Tookie's friend had given a statement to the police implicating Tookie in both crimes. Tookie was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of robbery using a firearm.
4 counts of murder. I thought it was 3. 4 counts of murder. I do remember parts of the story. I read his book as well. I believe it's autobiography, but I believe that it was a house, and that allegedly, supposedly, he went into this home to rob them or something, ended up killing everyone inside of the house. I mean, he went to death row for it. He was convicted of it, went to death row for it, and ultimately died for it, as I said, for the crime. No one killed him. He died. The state killed him. The chair killed him. The needle killed him, unfortunately. Some people I've spoken with personally have mixed feelings about it, truthfully, because they believe that he was guilty of these 4 deaths. Some people don't believe that he's guilty. I don't know. I'm not a detective.
Prosecutors alleged that on February 28, 1979, Tookie and 2 other gang members killed a store clerk while robbing a 7-Eleven. The prosecution then claimed that 11 days later, Tookie broke into the office of a motel and killed 3 of the motel employees during a robbery. Tookie denied all of the charges. During his trial, 2 of Tookie's friends who claimed to be there during the 7-Eleven robbery testified on the stand that Tookie was the one who shot the 7-Eleven clerk. And several other gang members testified that Tookie had bragged to them about the robbery and shooting at the motel. All the testimonies Tookie adamantly claimed were untrue. But after a
and there it is. There you have it. So that's why I thought there was 3 murders, because there were 3 people inside of the hotel. I know he supposedly went inside of somewhere, robbed them, and unalived some people. I thought maybe it was a home or whatever, but okay, a motel. And then the other killing happened somewhere else at a 7-Eleven 11 days prior, in which someone was robbed and gunned down in the 7-Eleven. And here you have a situation where everyone that this individual knows, he's the leader of a gang, but they're all snitching. They're all telling on him. Even back then, snitching was going on even back then. It's not a new thing. Snitching was going on even then. Hell, the snitching got him a death sentence. We talking about decades ago. 2 people testified against him in the 7-Eleven murder, and then other gang members testified against him and said that he was bragging about the other 3 murders. Before the braggadocio, apparently they had no one. He was not arrested. They had no one for the 7-Eleven murder, which is why the other 3 murders did not happen until 11 days later, because someone was still out on the loose and able to commit 3 more murders because he was not in custody. Until apparently, according to these reports, he started talking and told on himself or whatever, or his gang told on him, the Crips told on him, but because of what he told them, the information that he gave them in order to tell.
2-year trial, Tookie was convicted of all 4 murders, plus 2 counts of robbery, and was sentenced to death. He was 27 years old. Tookie was sent to California's San Quentin State Prison, and all his appeals from then on were denied. During Tookie's first few years in prison, prisoners and prison guards would make it a point to go by his cell just to look at him. His name was as famous behind bars as it was on the streets. And just like on the streets, Tookie remained an active gang member, even while sitting on death row. This led to him being put in solitary confinement for 6.5 years. While in solitary confinement, Tookie started reading and studying history. He started educating himself and began soul searching. And for the first time, he saw a life outside of being a gang member, and he wanted to share his experience. 16 years after entering prison, Tookie wrote an 8-book series of children's books. The books warned children of the dangers of gangs and drugs. He then wrote a book called Life.
He did try to change his life and turn his life around there in prison. A redemption story. And he tried to get off of death row. He wanted to come home, or at least get the death sentence off of him. He wrote the children's books, and he had a lot of support from celebrities and all sorts of people around the world asking and signing petitions and what have you, that his death sentence not be anymore, not stand. But it kept being denied and denied. There was a couple of people that really had it in for him and believed that he needed to die for his crimes or his alleged crimes, and they would not let up until he died. And they would, but he had changed his life, at least it appeared, and he was helping children get out of gangs and not join gangs with his work, with his books, his speeches, his commentary, his interviews, and his disposition. But that was not enough for the state. Though his life, if he were still alive, could have saved many lives had he continued down that vein, they said your life is worth more than all other lives that you could potentially save. And of course, the lives that you could potentially save, we don't care about saving anyway. So we'd rather just take you out and let whatever happens to them happen to them. Had he been trying to save lives that they deemed worthy of saving, then he would still be alive, I believe.
Prison, that was a warning of where gang life could lead. Life in Prison won 2 National Book Awards. In 2004, Tookie continued his effort to bring awareness to the destructiveness of gangs when he released his memoir, Blue Rage, Black Redemption, which got him nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. In Blue Rage, Black Redemption, Tookie wrote that after having years of time to reflect, he realized that as the Crip king, he was being celebrated for destroying his own people. And although he maintained his innocence for the crimes he was committed, he did apologize for his part in helping to create the Crips, and for that having led to the loss of thousands of lives, of gang members and innocent people caught in the crossfire, who all died, he said, for a cause that meant nothing. Hoping his words would reach as many people as possible, Tookie also took part in numerous programs to promote peace between rival gangs in Los Angeles. From prison, he recorded a video to help get his message across. And even though Crip gangs had split into hundreds of different sets around LA, and there was no longer a clear leader among any of them, when Tookie talked, people still listened.
Working together, we can put an end to this cycle that creates deep pain in the hearts of our mothers, our fathers, and our people who have lost loved ones to this senseless violence.
As Tookie displayed his newfound self and his path towards redemption, his opponents accused him of being insincere. They believed he was incapable of change and unworthy of redemption. Many said Tookie was only claiming he changed so he could escape the death penalty. But prison advocates, friends, and people from the community believed and celebrated Tookie's transition, and they petitioned for years to get Tookie's sentence commuted to life in prison. And on the day of his scheduled execution, thousands of people showed up to San Quentin to protest outside the prison walls. But none of Tookie's legal requests were approved, and his final request for a stay of execution from the governor was denied. On December 13, 2005, Stanley Tookie Williams III was executed by lethal injection. He was 51 years old. In Tookie's final years, he did his best to reverse the damage caused by the rise of street gangs, and he used his reputation as the Crip king to help put an end to gang violence. But even after everything he said and did, most people today only know him as being the man who created one of the biggest gangs in the world. But what Tookie wanted to be remembered for is showing that anyone is capable of changing their life around. In one of his final quotes, he said, "Even the lowest of the lowlife, despite their circumstances, can transform and redeem themselves." Hey everyone, it's Danielle.
Wow. There you have it, folks. The life of Stanley Tookie Williams. Leave me a comment. Let me know what y'all think, man. As I said, I didn't see this video before, but I knew already. And there it is. People were fighting for him, as I said, to save his life all around the world. And he was fighting to save his life, to get his death sentence commuted to, at least he wasn't even asking to come home. Just don't kill me. Commute my sentence to a sentence of life in prison as opposed to a death sentence, please. But they would not budge. And they wanted him gone, even though he could have saved lives, as I said. Now, they're saying that they believe that he was putting on a front. All of this was a surface change in order to get his sentence commuted, that it was insincere. He was not genuinely sorry for co-founding the Crips and all of the death and destruction that gang banging has caused in the communities. That in fact, it was a farce and a ploy in order to get off of death row. But no one really knows what's inside of any man's heart. I certainly, do not know if he was a changed man, truly or not. I don't know him. And because I don't know him, I certainly cannot say that he was faking it. Who am I to say? Who are you? Who is anyone to say that no one knows but the man himself? Whatever the case, unfortunately, if he was a changed man and could have saved in earnest many lives, it never came to fruition, and we'll never know, because they decided that, again, taking his life was more important than saving other lives, even potentially, possibly. Maybe he would have never saved a life. But the potential that he could have, and the fact that you discarded it, is an indication that you didn't care either way. But let me know what y'all think in the comments. That's the life and times of Tookie Williams. Pretty deep. Who was 27 years old when he was sentenced to death. I didn't know that. Didn't realize that he was so young, 27 years old. So he was very young still then when he had co-founded the infamous Crips, because he was 27 years old when he caught this case, 4 murder cases and 2 robberies, in which he was convicted of all and then sentenced to death. And with everyone, as we just seen, trying to save his life after he had clearly changed his life, or at least, again, I suppose it depends on who you ask, as to whether or not he had really changed his life or not. In spite of that, we'll never really know, because they were set on making sure that he was exterminated no matter what, even the potential to save a life. Now, I'm not trying to excuse or say that they killed him for that, because some are going to say, no, it's not because he could have saved lives and they didn't want those lives saved that they killed him. You're thinking too deep into this shit. They killed him because he killed 4 people, bro. That's it. He killed 4 people and he got the death penalty and he died on death row like anybody else that got the death penalty for whatever they got the death penalty for. That's it. There's nothing else to it. Some people are going to say that. Some people believe that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Stay safe and stay free, people.